Hi class, it's Alicia again. So for my project, I've decided to do a video because I do not have the wonderful skills that Colleen and Nicole have. They really did a fantastic job with their slide and audio presentations. So if you guys have any tips on how to do that in the future, I would love to know because that's a skill I'd like to learn. Um, but instead, I have chosen to do a video because it kind of plays a little bit into what we've been learning in class and the face-to-face and the communication and having a little bit more of that full-on story and discussion. So for starters, a little summary of the project that I did, or the project that I looked at was the SEWA, so the Self-Employed Women's Association. A little background behind this is that it is the union of formed by self-employed women who do not obtain a regular wage, and ultimately their work is seen as an invisible work. So what SEWA does is they work in securing long-term steady employment, health benefits, and even some childcare services by generating new income sources. And this can be such as managing community resources, farming, or even actually opening up an Airbnb and doing home sharing. And really, it's a goal their major goal is to support women and having women supporting other women and empowering themselves. So to me, this foundation very much fosters the community around innovation because they are not supplying anything, where instead they're just offering up new ways of thinking and allowing the community itself to be the change makers that they want to see, which I think is really fascinating. Coming into this, though, I had a lot of inquiry questions on how to kind of focus my research for this. I'm very much like a social science thinker, so I always think about like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on there? Like, what's the bigger picture? So that's kind of where my questions came from, and how it kind of shapes the idea of innovation and community. So the first one is, what are the cultural barriers that need to be respected? And then what are the ones that need to be challenged? So this kind of plays hand in hand. So one question. The second question is there opportunity in the community to place input within the thoughts, goals, and mission of SEWA? And then finally, what is the end goal? So does SEWA want to create a more independent and self-sustaining culture, or do they want to create one that is supported by the organization? And so to kind of be able to answer those questions, I may have gotten a little bit carried away, but I did a lot of research and trying to look at India in a whole and kind of where what their background is and how we got to where we are, and why these challenges are occurring and why this innovation needs to occur. So historically in India has been ruled by many powers. The first and the largest power rule was the Muslim power, and that was from the 13th century all the way to the mid-19th century when it was taken over by British rule, and that was just until recently into 1947. There was kind of a time in transition where it did lack some solid leadership, so that in recent years, it's actually really created a large vulnerability in India due to the lack and the wishy-washiness of power. And so this is kind of a big factor that in today's India is now run by their own leaders, but they're in this huge attempt to modernize the country and become an economic powerhouse. But one thing that kind of has lagged across from even the Muslim ruling and the British rule is the caste system. So this caste system has left many urban areas, rural areas, villages, very poverty-stricken of its residents. And so I'm going to dive a little bit more into that to kind of help talk about this idea of innovation. I'm not very good at like pronouncing new words and especially words that aren't ones that I see every day. So I will be supplying right above kind of some definitions, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the caste system and I will also post what the actual names for these little castes are. So you want to think about the caste system as a pyramid, and so it has leaders at the top, middle, and then the lower half. So at the very top of the pyramid, you're going to have the high priests or the intellectuals of society, and they make up a very small percentage of the population. These individuals as well are the most wealthy in the community. Second, you're going to move down and you're going to hit the police and administration in society, and they're going to be protecting and managing. Next, you're going to go down to the skilled workers and the craftsmen. So these are the farmers, and they provide all the goods to the community. And then finally, you are going to be going into the last caste, and these are the workers that are providing the services to the community. So although they're at the bottom, this is still a social class that is revered, and they do have respect, and they have a little bit of, they do have an important role in society, and they have a little bit of political maneuverability as well. But apart from these four classes, there's a fifth kind, commonly known as the untouchables. And so these still exist in modern India today, despite their like unconstitutional nature. It's very much just social segregation. So if you are born into an untouchable family, essentially you will always be an untouchable. And so you are deemed as unclean and not worthy. So you're going to be the sewer cleaners, you're going to be the butcher, grave diggers, the tanners, really seen as those filthy, unclean jobs. Sometimes you're not going to be able to have work because you're seen as an untouchable. And so this is really the population, specifically with women, that Siwa is trying to touch, and they're trying to bring up and rise up in that class. So another thing that I always think about when looking at something like this is I look at what are the root causes and what are some dynamic pressures that are causing these changes, that are causing these things. So kind of going into the root cause is that it really is just the social stigma that is this big root cause that causes this vulnerability, that causes this need for this innovation. And so it's individuals basically not having any political power. They also don't have any resources to pull from, and they are at such a low class and a low status that they have very, very limited political capital. Ultimately, this is going to take away from their ability to be linking with different social classes. So this is something, linking, bonding, bridging, is something that I kind of brought back, I believe it was in discussion 6. So linking is a vertical movement, bonding is within a community, and then bridging is between different classes. So it's kind of like this cascading effect of different types of social capital, which is really, really important in building innovative communities, is having a strong social capital. So we have some root causes that are kind of impeding this growth that we're kind of looking for. Very similar with the dynamic pressures, it's not only that these caste systems are causing extreme poverty, and it's also causing very limited accessibility to training and to being able to sustain higher paying jobs. So if you're part of this lower class, you're having an inability to even get up and out. So you're going to have to become more innovative in order to just separate yourself from the pack. And doing so, you need to think outside the box. Or everybody. I mean, it's not just sectors in India. It's kind of everybody. And additionally, when you are looking at the actors within the community, there is very few relationships that are spanning from player to player. And this is due to individualistic ideas. So this is another kind of dynamic pressure that we're looking at, is that the Indian culture places a very high stress on individualism, which also places a stress on the power distance complex and the inequality distribution. So very much emphasizes taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and not really looking out for others. So that is an important point that I'm going to jump back to in a little bit. But really, what it comes down to and kind of the bigger picture is building this social capital. So that's what's needed to happen, and this can be happening through empowering individuals, as well as like instilling some steadfast practices. So kind of pulling back into the class readings and discussions, there's 3 points that I'd like to touch on. This first is jumping back into Module 3 with John McKnight, and when we're talking about the relearning the ABCDs. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he made a comment that I think very much relates to this real utopia. And he said essentially that if a community is supplied with everything that it needs, it's going to be a consumer society. But if a community has some deficits, it's going to become innovative, and it's going to be able to grow and make change to fit those deficits. And this was something that very much, like, I had a very frightening realization, is that is very much the life we live. Everything here in our society is handed to us. And if you look at this real utopia in India, nothing is handed to them. So they are having to come up with ways to create a better life for themselves. And so kind of that idea of whether fostering a community of innovation versus just handing everything to them is kind of an interesting point and an interesting discussion. The second part is that touched on in one of the readings is that leadership. And so instilling leadership within a community. And that's exactly what Siwa is doing. So they are empowering women to empower other women. And those women are then leading the community. So women, if you don't already know, especially in developing countries, are very influential in rebounding and recovering after massive devastation, whether that be a natural disaster, whether that be something that is human caused, but they really do create a backbone, specifically in developing countries and third world countries. So they are very much an understated asset that communities do have. And so by focusing on women and focusing on the leadership within women, you're basically ensuring long-term sustainability of a project. And then lastly, I think, which was really important, which is something that I had to continue to think about when researching this real utopia, is shifting your mindset. So shifting your mindset to look at the positive. I was coming in and I was thinking, oh gosh, here are all these things. You got, they're struggling with this. They have this adversity that they have to overcome. They have, they have to worry about class. They have to worry about gender. They have to worry about all these things. And by the end, I was like, I should shift my mindset and look at all of the positive things that this community is happening. So those positive things are women empowering other women, the amount of creativity, the ability to carry on with such limited resources, the amount so I was also watching some videos when they partnered with Airbnb, and just like the amount of excitement and energy that these women had, and this idea of like self-worth was incredibly powerful. So shifting that mindset is also something that we were reading in the readings, we had our discussion, and then I also saw when researching this real utopia. So kind of jumping back into the initial research questions that I kind of discovered. The first one was, which cultural barriers should be respected and which should be challenged? Same question, and I'm going to answer it with the same answer, and it's social castes. So they should be respected because they are very much part of the culture, but they should also be challenged because essentially they create this social segregation that in modern society we have deemed as um, I don't want to say unworthy, but we've deemed it as like unconstitutional. But at the same time, you can't come in there and say, oh, well, you have to change this and you have to make this transition. So we need to, it needs to be respected, but also people need to rethink how they think about it. And another question that I had is there opportunity for the community to place input? And the answer is yes. And we did find this a lot, especially in the fact that the community itself has very limited resources. So they have so much potential to be able to make an impact. And then finally, what is the end goal? And essentially, I found through my research is that they do want to create a self-sustaining organization where they're not supplying anything. They're just the thought. They're just the push to get community members involved and to get the women involved and stuff. So that kind of wraps up my research and kind of what I talked about. Please feel free to post if you have any questions. I really enjoyed doing this research and kind of discussing it, thinking about social innovation, and it kind of like got my wheels turning. I kind of wish that I had a couple weeks to think about it. I'm kind of the person that has a lot of ideas up front, but the really good ones take a few weeks to kind of curate. So if anybody wants to touch back with me later on, I'd be willing to talk about it. And you can email me if you feel interested. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Bye.